Hello again, BRC family. It's Pastor Jay here with week 7 already. Can you believe it? Week 7, talking about chapter 6 of a we-based evangelism strategy, not just a me-based evangelism strategy. So I hope you enjoyed this so far. This chapter was a good one, showing some differences that we can do, and hopefully a we-based strategy will make you a little bit more bold as well in sharing your faith, let alone just, more comfortable and helping other people feel more comfortable, plus all the other stuff he said in the chapter, which is very helpful. But it all started out with that story about April. If that's a real name or not, but April came to one of their Alpha groups. Remember, Alpha is a group-based, meal-based time that is to come together to talk about the things of the faith. And again, I loved how he said, again, he reiterated the fact that they don't correct, they don't judge, they don't snap and tell her, no, that's not the way it is. It's got to be this way. They let her process the information that they're giving to her. And again, I'm so glad he also told the truth that, there are a lot of people that are like April that just stop coming. They don't like what they're hearing and they just don't come anymore. And that's okay. God is the one that's doing the work of the harvest, while we're just planting the seeds, and that's important too. But April, in this case, did come back, and he missed 2 weeks for his shoulder surgery, and all of a sudden, April's a changed person trying to convert everybody else to Christianity. And the best part of that story, of course, is the end when we find out that, yes, more people came to know Christ because of April than anything that was talked about in the Alpha group. They witnessed her transformation from someone who was hostile and defensive, angry, to a person who accepted the truth of Jesus Christ and therefore was so on fire that they wanted other people to come along with them. So that's the picture that I like that he painted of this we-based evangelism and not just me-based. And of course, he talks about the problem in the beginning of the chapter. The problem is that, the number one evangelism strategy in the majority of Western churches is the pastor. Right? Pastors are called, equipped, gifted, and the unwritten contract between a pastor and a congregation is often, you get them into church and I'll seal the deal. Well, that may work for some people. That may work for people that have the gift of evangelism to get people to come to church for them. But there are times that people just don't fit well with a specific church that they go to, and then they have the excuse saying, well, I tried it and it just wasn't for me. And that's not a great evangelism strategy, especially for people who are often angry about Christianity, or like an April, if you will, in this part of the chapter. The other section, he talked a little bit about what has been the evangelism strategy, and I was very happy for his vulnerability in the chapter of talking about his church failures, right? Is that he has tried it and it didn't work, and he was willing to share that, is that, the strategy was often these classes or courses, and they would often speak to those who had the spiritual gift of evangelism, and they would go and they would run with it, but for the rest of the people, which if you read the statistics on page 137, that the rest of the people is a huge majority in our church. It said there only 4% of church attendees actually had the spiritual gift of evangelism in their top 3 spiritual gifts. And the Barna Group reports that number has declined from 4% back in 1990, which is 30 years ago, for those of you who are keeping track at home, to 1% now. Only 1 out of 100 Christians either believe or actually have the spiritual gift of evangelism in our churches. And so, yes, if you're doing the math, if you're writing this down at home, we average less than 200 on a Sunday. So that means there's 1 or 2 people in our congregation at BRC that have in their top 3 spiritual gifts the gift of evangelism. Now, that might be people don't know they have that gift because they've never tried it. That's a possibility. But that's still a staggering number of all the people here at BRC. So again, that's been the strategy in the past, is that me-based, one-on-one. Let me share with someone that hopefully I have a relationship with. And they're still good to that if you have a relationship with someone, to share that gift with them. But what I really liked is that on page 138, he shared and said, that's good, that it might work, but we've seen a trend where hundreds of people respond in a moment, and yet their faith often fizzles without a quick insertion into a life and community of discipleship. If we can't get them plugged into a church, even if a one-on-one conversion experience takes place, then that faith is going to fizzle over time. Or if we're thinking back to Jesus' parable of the sower, is that faith is going to get choked out by the weeds over time. So what he's proposing, and I'm agreeing with, is a broader reaching, we-based evangelism strategy in Jesus's ministry that was there from the very beginning, right? We had that huge story of how Jesus called his disciples, and then Matthew, Levi, both the same person, threw the big party for Jesus with all of his friends, who were tax collectors and sinners, is the way that the ESV translates that passage. And I loved his taking a little bit of liberty with maybe some of the dialogue at that party, and thinking about how really not religious those people were, and that's okay. And Jesus thought that was okay. And Jesus took his time to be there. Jesus not only took his time to be there, he didn't shy away from being there, and he didn't completely change everything, I'm sure, that they were saying, because he was the guest of honor, but he just allowed that to take place, and he just showed them what it meant that Levi was a changed person and that they could be too. And that's a big deal. That's a way different strategy than what we've been using in the churches for many, many years. So how do we do that, right? We have to ask ourselves the question that he posed on page 141. Are we known as friends like Jesus? Have we created spaces within our church evangelism strategy and personal lives for gathering outsiders? Or is it primarily a me-based Sunday morning personal evangelism training and Christian small group only model, reinforcing the us versus them mentality so prevalent in our society today? You remember that from chapter 2. We talked about that as well. So he's asking us these questions. Do we live individually entering spaces of outsiders and creating places at our table for groups of those outside the faith? Or do our tables look like the tables where Jesus sat? I don't know the answer to those questions. I don't know how much time we're spending with non-Christians, how much time we're eating with non-Christians. That was a big point of the chapter as well, that we need to eat together. Now, I know COVID's going to make that a little bit more difficult, but in a home setting with hopefully people that are, safe and stay safe and keep you safe, then yeah, it's going to happen. Or at least people who know what the symptoms are and will tell you if they can't come over to eat at that point, then you just have to wait 10 days and you can do it again. But that's the question now of, are we opening up space for non-Christians to come and be a part of our lives and of our churches? Or are we closed off to those outside the faith? I hope the answer is not the second one. But I would assume that for a lot of us that's true, because that's what the statistics in there are saying. And again, let me say this for the umpteenth time. These questions are not meant to produce guilt in you or make you feel bad or shamed. No, these questions are there to tell you what the truth is of your life. Maybe you never thought that you were closed off to non-Christians before, but these questions kind of point in that direction. So again, you're not a horrible person. We're not kicking you out of the church. None of these terrible things are happening. But what can you do? You don't have to turn around tomorrow and invite 16 non-Christians over your house to have a beer wine tasting party or anything like that. That's not what we're saying. But what small steps can you take to be a little bit more open? Because it's taking those small incremental life-changing steps that are going to make that change last. And so what can you, what can BRC do to be more of a we-based evangelism strategy and not just a me-based evangelism strategy? And I don't have all the answers. I'm sorry. I'm hoping that some of you will give me some good answers on on some of the strategies that we could do. What can we do here at BRC to be more open to hostile April non-Christians, if you will, that are outside, that are here in Brunswick and all over our community. So as we move into the rest of the bulk of the chapter, from pages 144 to 150, talk about this we-based evangelism strategy and what some of it brings with it. So the good news is, a we-based evangelism strategy equips everyone for doing that, right? We are all called in the Great Commission to go and make disciples of all nations. That's not specifically for pastors. That's not specifically for people who have the gift of evangelism. Each person is given the task of go and make disciples of all nations. And so that is our task. And so we-based means that everyone is getting equipped because they're participating in it together. Yeah, you might have a leader of a ministry who is very gifted and very experienced and can share that, but over time, each person will be given the gift and be trained and equipped with the gift of evangelism throughout some time. Excuse me, they won't be given the gift. I don't want to misspeak on that one, but even people who might not know they have it can be trained and equipped to do evangelism even without the gift. That's a better statement. It also doesn't require evangelism experts. That's the huge deal, is that everyone can just share their little bit of what Christ means to them and what their faith means to them and how Jesus has impacted their life. And that's a great thing. It doesn't require an expert. We don't have to have somebody with all the answers. When we gather together and just talk, that's all we have to do, is just be able to talk and listen. Let's go back a couple chapters and remember the act of listening. How do we listen better to one another? It also only requires a deep love and empathy. That's really all you need to do, is you need to love other people enough to share with them the best gift that you've ever received. And do it in a way, again, where you're listening, where you're providing a space for conversation and all the stuff that we've talked about. We need to make sure we remember we're not forgetting all of the past chapters. We're adding them to this we-based evangelism strategy where we create conversation, where we're doing fruit, we're doing good things so that the community can see us, so people might want to come and check out this group. All of the other things, we're not just proclamation, we're conversing. All these things that we're changing the way in which we do evangelism all run together. And so it's a great thing that all you need to bring with you is a love and empathy for people and the willingness to share and be courageous and step out in your faith and talk to someone who doesn't agree with you. And that's okay. It also builds over time. That love and empathy will build over time. So all you got to do is step out and have it at first, and then it'll grow. I guarantee it. It also creates a ripple effect. I love this part of the chapter. That's what I wanted to get to and make sure we spend a little bit of time on it. But that was that part about April, is not only did April come to know Christ, many other people in that group came to know Jesus and said, this has got to be real, because of we just have witnessed what she experienced. We were a witness to what just took place, and that's very different than just a one-on-one, let me tell you about my story. That it branches out and creates that ripple effect. That's a great deal. And then it also, he says, it creates a conversion effect. Is, again, you see that conversion in someone else, that's going to ripple out and cause some experiential things. If we go back a couple chapters again and talk about that experience chapter, people are going to see that experience in someone else. And if we do it one-on-one evangelism, no one else is going to experience that. No one's going to see that. And that also is going to help the person sharing their faith remember their conversion experience and what it felt like when Christ first came into their life and saved them from their sins. It's a huge deal. It also allows people to see the gospel at work and create exponential growth, right? That's that one person that tells others, that tells others, that tells others. Sorry to use a mathematical term if that's a trigger for you. But exponential growth, meaning it's going to affect so many more people when we do we-based evangelism instead of just me-based evangelism. In this context or in our church, it's going to reach out and branch out so much farther than just a one-on-one experience. So those are all the benefits and things that it requires to do a we-based evangelism strategy. I don't know about you, but to me, it sounds like this is doable. Sounds like this is something that we could pull off here at BRC. So page 152, near the end of the chapter, he says, many people today aren't initially interested in coming to church or impacted by what they experience if they do. But what if evangelism is as simple as inviting someone to dinner? Crazy thing. What if it's as simple as promising a table where they'll be listened to, not judged, and experience the kind of community they probably haven't experienced before? What if we can do that? What if it's much easier to invite someone to dinner than it is to invite someone to church? I would think, right? We're having this dinner. I want you to come over, and I just want you to talk about stuff. I'm not going to judge or listen. I am going to listen, and I'm not going to judge. and just show you what it's like to be a part of a church where people can love one another. I think BRC does a great job of loving one another. I really, truly do. And I know that this will be, if we can employ or put into place this we-based strategy, that can be very successful just because of who the people are here at BRC. So yeah, that's the basis of this chapter. I hope it wasn't. I don't think it was too deep. I don't hope it wasn't. I hope it didn't get too muddy the water. But I hope this changed your mind just a little bit on what evangelism looks like. It's not always just a one-on-one relational conversation with someone. It can be, but if we do it in this we-based strategy, then I think it can have greater, lasting, exponential effects for the kingdom of God. So, some questions for us for the rest of today. How could your personal evangelism strategy become more we-based? What can you do? And again, if you're here because you're saying, I don't have a strategy, I don't do anything, well, how can you create a we-based strategy and do meals with people that are non-Christians and other people from the church too? So it's not just you by yourself, but a couple church families and a couple non-church families to just have some conversation. Which one of the benefits, or two, of the small group-based evangelism described on page 144 to 150 strike you as the most beneficial for your small group and for our church? Which one of those did you like the best? Again, remember, that's the fact that it equips everyone. It doesn't require evangelism experts. It only requires a deep love and empathy that builds over time. It creates a ripple effect, and it creates a conversion effect. Which one of those struck a chord with you? I told you which one I liked the most. Which one stuck out to you, and which one is the best for you and maybe for your small group? I don't just want a yes or no answer to this question number 3. I want an expansion too. But if April came to BRC in her original state, swearing up a storm and very angry, would we have a place for her to grow and process the information and the experience of Christianity over time? Yes or no, but also why? Why don't we? Where could we? What's different? What could we do differently? But then number 4 is really leading into that. The one we always do is pair up into groups and talk about what are some small steps we can take at BRC to become we-based in our evangelism strategy and create small group opportunities for people to eat and talk about their faith. How can we do that? What are some practical ways in which we can do that here at BRC? I look forward to hearing some of your answers and some of your suggestions and what's going on in your lives and how we can do this. But next week is our last week. I'm sad to say. Thank you for sticking it out, for being a part of this group, and hopefully joining and creating some we-based strategies for BRC going forward in the future. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. God bless. Bye-bye.